He was the Alpha King, forged in war, carved from winter, ruling a kingdom that bowed to no one. He didn't ask for a queen. He didn't need one. Until the border wolf with storm in her blood walked into his hall, and destiny dared to test him. She was supposed to stand alone, listening to the land, guarding the quiet places where danger breathes. But visions began to hunt her. A silver-eyed wolf crossing forests and borders, drawing closer with every heartbeat. And when destiny finally tore open the doors of his kingdom, the entire realm watched Rhea face the storm, and the Alpha King step beside her. Not to bind her, not to claim her, but to choose her. This is the night the storm came for their future, and the night they chose each other anyway. The first time Raven saw the Alpha King's hall, it felt less like a place and more like destiny tightening around her. Stone columns rose like dark tree trunks toward a vaulted ceiling carved with running wolves and crescent moons, their eyes inlaid with pale amber that caught every flicker of torchlight. Banners hung between them, black, iron gray, blood red, bearing the sigil of the crown pack, a wolf's head wreathed in thorns and a broken circlet of silver. At the far end, the throne sat raised on 3 steps of black granite, wide enough to be a hunting platform. The man on it did not sit like a king. He sat like a predator forced to be still. Alpha King Finn's shoulders filled the carved back of the chair, the muscles in his forearms tight where they rested on the arms, fingers curled as if resisting the urge to flex. His hair was dark and close-cropped at the sides, longer on top, the kind of cut that made him look sharper rather than softer. A scar crossed his right brow and disappeared into his hairline, the kind of old wound he carried without apology. His gaze, when it found Raven, pinned her as thoroughly as any command. She did not look away. The great hall hummed with barely leashed sound. Alphas from allied packs, ranked wolves, advisors, and courtiers lining the sides. The weight of their attention pressed against Raven's skin as she walked the length of the hall, footsteps echoing soft but steady over stone. Her dress was not a court gown. She had refused silk and jewels. Instead, she wore forest green wool that hugged her waist and fell in clean lines to the floor, the fabric sturdy, honest. Her only adornment was the small silver ring that hung on a leather cord against her collarbone, the last thing her mother had given her before dying in a border skirmish. A guard moved a half-step closer at her side, mistaking the slow of her stride for hesitation. "I'm not going to bolt," she murmured. The guard flushed and retreated a half-step, his head ducking in apology. The herald's voice rose above the gathering's low murmur, formal and ringing. "Raven of Frosthaven, blood daughter of Alpha Merrick, ward of the northern border." The titles sounded strange in the open air. Raven had worn them her whole life, but they had always been spoken in passing, inside a pack that knew her, not thrown like a stone into a den of strangers. Ward of the northern border. Which was to say, the one who lived where the kingdom ended, first to notice shifting winds, first to warn them when danger stirred. Not a princess, not a queen. Raven came to a stop at the foot of the throne steps. Finn did not rise immediately. His eyes swept over her once, not in the crude way many alphas had measured her in the past, but as if taking stock. Shoulders, spine, the set of her chin, the way her hands hung loose instead of clenched. He stood. The movement rippled through the hall. Wolves stilled. Conversations died. The air changed. Finn descended the steps with the unhurried gait of a man who had never needed to hurry to be obeyed. Up close, he was taller than she'd expected. Most kings she'd met in her life had hidden behind chairs and titles, not their own height. His presence carried the scent of winter wind and pine resin, threaded with something darker, older. He stopped one step above her, close enough that if she lifted her chin, her breath would brush his throat. "Raven of Frosthaven," he said, voice low, edged in rough velvet. "You were expected at dawn." "I was at the border at dawn," she replied. "There was a storm moving in from the east. Your scouts missed it. His brow ticked, just barely. And did you stop it? No. Her mouth curved the slightest fraction. But I warned your riders. They took the lower pass instead. No one froze today. A breath of something like amusement touched his eyes. It was gone quickly, but she had seen it. You kept my people alive before you walked into my hall, Finn said. Noted. The murmurs started again then, not all of them pleased. To their right, an elder in dark robes stepped forward, his silver hair bound back, eyes sharp as flint. Your Majesty, he said, bowing just enough to mark respect, not enough to forget his own standing. Form requires— What form requires, Finn interrupted, without looking away from Raven. We'll be satisfied. The elder's jaw tightened. The council must speak to the matter of— The council has spoken to the matter for 3 moons, Elder Garen. Finn's tone did not rise, but it cut through the hall like cold steel. The border needs unity. The Pax need stability. The future queen stands before us. The time for speaking is done. He finally broke his gaze from Raven to step past her, turning to face the hall. He stepped past her, positioning himself a breath ahead, subtly placing his body between her and the room, as if shielding her came as naturally as breathing. Raven noticed. So did everyone else. Wolves of the Crown, Finn called, his voice filling the hall without effort. Alphas of the allied Pax, you know the storms that have been gathering beyond our borders, rogues testing our lines, old enemies sniffing at weak seams. You know the cost of divided rule. He paused, letting the words sink in. Tonight, that division ends. He extended a hand back without looking. It was not a command. It was an invitation. Raven's pulse thudded once, hard, against the base of her throat. The leather cord of her mother's ring lay warm against her skin, as if remembering other choices she had made at other crossroads. Crown versus calling. Stay on the border, listening to the whispers only she seemed able to hear, or step into the center of power and change the shape of the kingdom itself. The decision had been made for her days ago when the decree arrived, but this, her hand into his, was the first part that was hers alone. She placed her palm against his. His fingers closed around hers, firm and sure, not allowing for hesitation, but not forcing pain either. There was heat there, an immediate, visceral awareness that traveled up her arm, settling low under her ribs. Finn drew her up the steps. The throne was behind them now, before them, the hall. Finn did not stand at the center of the platform alone. He stopped slightly to the side, making room for her. A subtle thing, but it did not go unnoticed. Raven felt the ripple move through the crowd again, calculations shifting, alliances reconsidered. This kingdom, Finn said, has been held together by teeth and steel, by oaths and fear. It has survived because we have been harder to break than those who came against us. He looked down at Raven then, allowing everyone to see his attention settle on her openly, without apology. But survival is not enough. Silence deepened, the kind that carried thousands of held breaths. Raven of Frosthaven has walked our outermost borders alone since she was old enough to shift, he continued. She has stood where the veil between wild and world is thin. She has felt storms before they gather, sensed enemies before they struck. She has given more to the safety of these lands than many who stand in this hall. His fingers curled more tightly around hers, as if anticipating resistance from more than just the room. The crown requires more than power. It requires someone who will listen when the land itself is speaking. Someone who understands that strength is not always measured in how loudly one commands, but how quietly one stands and does not move. Raven's throat went tight. He was not flattering her. It would have been easier to ignore her entirely, to treat her as a pretty piece to set beside his throne. Instead, he was naming what she was in front of all of them. He was making it impossible to reduce her to decoration. Elder Garin stepped forward again, careful, controlled. "Your Majesty, tradition will be honored," Finn said, "which is why you, Elder, will speak the formal words." Garin's eyes narrowed. He did not like being used as a vessel for a decision he had not authored, but he could not refuse without breaking more than tradition. He inclined his head once, sharply, then began. "The bond between Alpha King and Luna Queen," he intoned, "is the bond between crown and land, between pack and path, witnessed by pack and moon, sealed in blood and vow. Does the Alpha King take this wolf to stand at his side, to guard what he guards, to carry what she carries?" Finn's answer came without hesitation. "I do." The words were a vow without the formal mark, and yet Raven felt something move in the air around them, as if the hall itself had drawn one long breath. Garin's gaze shifted to her. Does Raven of Frosthaven accept this bond, to stand where he stands, to choose the good of the pack above her own path? There it was, the edge of the blade. Raven held Finn's hand, feeling the steady heat of his palm, the controlled strength in his grip. From the corner of her eye, she saw the faces watching them. The alphas who feared losing influence, the families who hoped for stability, the wolves who needed someone to believe in. Her calling had always been the border. Listening, warning, walking alone where others would not. This was another kind of border, another kind of storm. "I accept," she said quietly. Her voice did not carry like Finn's, but it did not need to. The hall was so still that even her breathless whisper reached the furthest corners. Garin lifted a thin blade, the ceremonial knife gleaming in the firelight. Raven's instincts prickled. Her wolf did not like steel near their skin, but ceremony demanded blood. Finn released her hand only long enough to offer his own first. "Mine," he said. Garin hesitated. "Majesty, she will not bleed before I do," Finn said simply. Something softened in the eyes of a few wolves at the front. Respect, surprise, calculation refined into reluctant admiration. Garin pressed the blade to Finn's palm. Red welled bright and quick. Finn did not flinch. His gaze stayed on Raven. When Garin turned to her, Raven extended her hand without waiting to be asked. The steel kissed her skin. Pain flashed sharp and clean. She did not look at the cut. She looked at Finn. Their hands were pressed together, blood to blood. The heat between their palms deepened, not the heat of flustered attraction, but something older, a recognition that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with weight, crown and calling. He was asking her to share both. "Witnessed," Garin said, voice ringing out. "By pack and moon, by blood and vow, the engagement is sealed." The hall erupted. Some voices rose in approval, others in muted dissent. Raven heard the words like waves crashing over rock. She did not move. Neither did Finn. For a long moment, their hands stayed pressed together, the ceremonial knife forgotten on the table where the elder had set it. "Breathe," Finn said under the roar of the crowd, the word pitched low for her alone. "I am breathing," she replied. His mouth curved, just enough to be noticed by those closest, not enough to be called a smile. "Good." He let the council have their noise, their whispered arguments, their quick rearranging of plans. Only when the volume shifted from shock to something more mingled, acceptance, inevitability, did he release her hand. Blood streaked his palm. A line of crimson marked her own. He lifted her wrist before she could wipe it away, his thumb brushing just shy of the cut. He did not press, did not claim more than the moment permitted, but he held her wrist as if reminding the room who she now stood with. "Walk with me," he said. It was not framed as a question. Still, when his gaze met hers, there was room in it, room for refusal if she chose it. That, more than anything, made her nod. Finn led her down the side of the platform to a smaller door carved into the stone behind one of the banners. 2 guards moved to follow. Finn's bare, blood-marked hand lifted a fraction. "Stay," he ordered. They froze mid-step. Raven's skin prickled as she stepped into the passageway beside him, leaving the roar of the hall behind. Stone closed around them, the noise shrinking to a muted thrum. Torches burned at intervals, casting warm light and long shadows. It felt like stepping behind the veil of a storm, where everything was quieter, but the power ran closer to the bone. Only when they reached a narrow balcony did Finn stop. The door opened onto cold air, the kind that bit the inside of her lungs and cleared her head. Below them, the city spread out in tiers of stone and strain. Rooftops, chimneys, the glimmer of distant watchfires along the outer walls. Raven stepped forward to the balustrade, fingers brushing the cool stone, letting the wind comb through her hair. It smelled of snow to come and something else she couldn't yet name. Behind her, Finn did not move far. He took his place half a step to her right, just close enough that his body formed a shield between her and the doorway, as if even here he couldn't quite stop guarding the angles. "Is this the part where you ask if I'm grateful?" she asked quietly. "For being handed a king instead of the life I'd built?" "No," he said. "This is the part where I tell you that if you try to run, I will find you." Her fingers tightened on the stone. His tone hadn't hardened. It was not a threat laden with anger. It was a statement of fact, anchored in something that felt disturbingly like concern. She turned her head, studying him in profile. The line of his jaw, the solemn set of his mouth, the way his eyes tracked the distant border fires even now, as if part of him never left that edge. "Possessive," she murmured. "Protective," he corrected. His gaze slid back to her. "You've been the kingdom's first warning for years, Raven. I will not let the crown swallow you, or the border take you. Not now." He didn't say, "Not when you wear my blood." He didn't have to. "Your council doesn't approve," she said. "My council doesn't like surprises. They'll live." "And if I don't?" she asked, letting the question hang somewhere between jest and truth. His jaw worked once, an almost imperceptible grind. "Tell me if the visions become too heavy," he said. The words startled her more than any threat could have. She went very still. "What did you say?" "Don't look at me like I've mentioned a secret," Finn replied. "You think your father didn't send reports? The northern border doesn't just have a ward. It has a witch the land speaks to." "I'm not a witch." "A listener, then." His gaze searched her face, softer now, but no less intent. "You've been seeing more than storms this past year." It wasn't a question, and yet it brushed against something she didn't talk about, couldn't name without feeling it tighten around her like a net. Shadows at the edge of her sleep, flickers of wolves she did not know, a crown broken and reforged over a face she could never quite see. "I listen," she said carefully. "The land doesn't always make sense." "It will." Finn turned back to the city, hands braced on the stone. "And when it does, I'd rather you stand here with me than alone at the edge of the world." There was a roughness in that admission that felt more intimate than any caress. She watched the tension riding his shoulders, the way his fingertips flexed on the stone, like a man accustomed to holding himself back. "You're very sure of yourself, Your Majesty," she murmured. His mouth curved. "I'm very sure of what I protect." "And what is that, exactly?" He didn't look at her when he answered. The words were quiet, unadorned, sliding under her skin. "Whatever I've bound my blood to." Heat curled in her chest, slow and unsettling. This was not the boastful claiming of shallow alphas who wanted to own a pretty Luna. This was something heavier, more dangerous. A man who understood that possession meant responsibility, not just rights. "Then you should know something," Raven said, turning to face him more fully. The wind tugged at her hair, lifting dark strands around her face. "I will not be a silent crown." "I know," he said. "I will not stand by if your council chooses the easy path over the right one. I'm counting on it. And if the land speaks against you?" He finally looked at her then, really looked as if measuring the edge of her defiance and finding it not only acceptable, but necessary. "Then I expect my queen to tell me the truth," he said, "even if it cuts." Her pulse stumbled. He had not said future queen. He had said my queen. The possessiveness in those two words should have made her bristle. Instead, it settled somewhere low in her spine, mingling with the wind and the scent of snow and the weight of the blood still drying on her palm. Below them, bells began to ring, calling the city to celebration. Torches flared along the streets as news of the engagement spread outward from the hall like fire catching dry tinder. "Your people are already cheering," she said softly. "They don't even know me." "They will." Finn's voice had that same unshakable certainty. "They'll learn your name like they know the scent of rain. And if they don't like me?" He shifted then, closing the remaining fraction of distance between them. Not touching, not quite. But the heat of his body pressed along her side, an invisible contact that made the fine hairs on her arms lift. "They can learn," he said, "or they can keep their opinions to themselves. No one will move against you while I breathe." There was nothing insecure in that vow, no hint of jealousy or fear that she would choose someone else. It was simply a line of steel laid between her and the world. Raven found herself breathing a little deeper, as if the space inside her chest had quietly expanded to fit this new, unwelcome, undeniable reality. Crown versus calling. For the first time, she wondered if they truly had to be at war. Behind them, the hall waited. The politics, the dances, the endless parade of wolves who would test her, measure her, hope to sway her. Beside her, the Alpha King stood like a wall she had not asked for, but now had to decide what to do with. Raven let her fingers slide from the balustrade until her hand hovered just above his, close enough that if either of them shifted, their skin would meet. He did not move. Neither did she. The restraint between them thrummed like a drawn bowstring. "Come," Finn said at last, voice lower than before. "If we stay out here much longer, they'll assume I've devoured you." "Have you?" she asked, the corner of her mouth lifting. "Devoured many would-be queens on balconies?" His eyes darkened, not with hunger, but with something older, more tired. "No, I've buried too many wolves to find sport in fear." The answer stripped any playfulness from the air. It left behind only truth. He offered his arm. This time, when Raven took it, it wasn't because the hall was watching. It was because the storm waiting inside would be easier to face with a wall at her side than with empty space. As they stepped back through the doorway, the roar of celebration swelled to meet them. Somewhere deep under her ribs, beneath the weight of the crown pressing toward her and the quiet pull of the land calling her name, another thread stirred. Faint, uncertain, the first whisper of destiny changing its course. Night in the Crown Palace carried a different kind of silence than the border. At the border, silence lived. Here, it watched. Raven felt it as she walked the long eastern corridor alone, heavy stone walls warmed by torchlight, tapestries shifting slightly in the draft that seeped through ancient seams. She'd been given chambers near the king's wing, an honor according to the council, a necessity according to Finn, and an invitation, according to the whispers that followed her since the blood vow. She ignored the whispers. She always had. Her hand brushed the silver ring at her throat, the leather cord warm from her skin. She had worn it her entire life. Tonight, it felt heavier than usual, as if it too listened to the palace breathing around her. She paused at a window. The night beyond was deep and sharp, the moon thinning into a waning crescent above the distant black line of the outer walls. She could feel the land tugging at her, quiet, persistent, the way it always tugged before something shifted. But this time, the pull had teeth. A tremor, subtle as a thread snapping inside her ribs, tightened through her. Then another. Her breath hitched. The corridor darkened. Not physically, not in the way torches gutter or shadows stretch. The darkness folded inward, as if something unseen stepped between her and the world. Raven gripped the stone windowsill until her knuckles whitened. A shape flickered at the edge of her mind. A wolf, tall, powerful, fur dark as nightfall. Not Finn, not any wolf she knew. This one was blurred, half-seen, as though destiny itself refused to show her the full face of the creature it was sending. Its eyes, she saw those clearly, silver, burning, fixed on her. Not now, she whispered under her breath, forcing the vision back. Not here. But visions did not obey commands. The wolf's gaze bore into her, and something inside her chest tightened, as if an invisible rope had looped around her heart and pulled. The balcony stone under her palms went cold. Too cold. Her pulse kicked. Fast. Unsteady. She forced her breath low and steady, pushing the image back into the recesses of her mind. When her eyes opened again, the corridor had returned to itself. But she had not. "Raven!" His voice came from behind her. She didn't startle, but only because she had heard the faint shift of leather and fur before he spoke. She turned her head slightly. Finn stood several paces down the corridor, posture steady, hands loose at his sides, though the tension in his shoulders said he did not like finding her unguarded. He approached with measured steps, stopping close enough that she felt the heat of him at her back. "You should be resting." His voice was calm, but the edge beneath it was real. "So should you," she replied. "Kings rest less than most," he said, then studied her face. "Your breathing is uneven. What happened?" "Nothing. Too fast." His jaw shifted. "Don't lie to me." She turned fully toward him, dragging the remnants of the vision out of her expression. "I'm not lying. I'm adjusting." "To the palace?" His eyes searched hers again. "Or to me?" The words unsettled her in ways she refused to show. "To both," she said. Finn stepped closer until she felt the warmth of him under her skin. Not touching, not crowding, but his presence filled the space in a way that grounded her pulse, whether she wanted it to or not. "The council wants you to begin your queen's instruction tomorrow," he said. "Tradition, ceremony, protocol." His lip curled faintly. "It's tedious." "Then why not refuse?" "Because a crown isn't worn alone." His voice softened, though the steel in it never left. "And because you don't deserve to walk into this blind." Raven's breath hitched again, not from a vision this time, but at the way his gaze held hers, as though he saw more than she intended to reveal. "Finn," she said carefully, "I didn't agree to be helpless here." "I know." He leaned in just slightly, enough that her heartbeat stuttered. "I agreed not to let you be." Heat slid between them, subtle, restrained, the kind born of proximity and self-control rather than touch. A low chime echoed through the corridor, one of the palace signal bells, faint, distant, routine. Finn didn't look away from her, not immediately. "You're trembling," he said. "I'm cold. You're lying again." Raven stiffened, but only slightly. "I'm not." "You are," he said softly. "And it isn't fear. I would know." His eyes held hers for one long, quiet moment, dark, steady, unbearably perceptive. Then he stepped back. The space he left behind felt colder than the window stone. "Walk with me," he said. The words echoed what he'd said earlier on the balcony, but the tone was different now, heavier, threaded with something he wasn't naming. She followed him down the corridor, boots whispering over ancient rugs, passing moonlit arches and carved pillars shaped like wolf forms rising from stone. They entered a smaller chamber, round, domed, the ceiling painted with constellations she recognized from the border sky. A low table sat in the center with maps spread across it, candles burning low around the perimeter. Finn gestured to the map. This is the northern line. Your line. The parchment was marked with red ink, rogue sightings, shifting paths, strange disturbances, exactly the kind of things she used to report. You haven't told them everything, she said. I haven't told anyone everything. His gaze lifted slowly to hers. I'm waiting for the one person who hears the land to tell me what I'm missing. Her lungs tightened. Finn, You had a vision, he said, not accusing, not pushing. Didn't you? Raven looked away. Her silence was answer enough. He stepped closer again, but not the way he had earlier. This time his presence felt like a shield, a boundary, a promise that whatever she said would not leave the room unless she chose it. What did you see? He asked. I don't know. It was the truth, but it sounded weak. He reached out and hesitated. The smallest falter of a man who wanted to touch her but refused to take what wasn't offered. Raven surprised herself. She closed the distance, just enough that the back of her hand brushed his. Barely anything, but it was something. Finn exhaled once, sharply, and she felt the restraint roll through him like a wave. His voice lowered. Raven. I'm fine, she whispered. You're not. His jaw flexed. And whatever you saw, it pulled at you. She swallowed, hard. Yes. What was it? A wolf, she said. Not one I know. His eyes darkened, not with jealousy, but with calculation, concern, protectiveness. Describe him. I can't, she said. He wasn't clear, only his eyes. What color? Silver. Silence stretched between them, deep, thoughtful, unsettling. Finn drew one slow breath, then another. His voice, when it came, was quiet steel. There is no wolf in this kingdom with eyes like that. I know, Raven whispered, and yet you saw him. She nodded. And he was looking at you, Finn said. Not a question. Her pulse thumped. Yes. Finn stepped closer, slow, deliberate, until her back nearly brushed the edge of the map table, until his heat pressed through the thin space between them, held back only by his will. Raven, he said quietly, visions don't come without purpose. I know. Then listen to me. His hand rose, not to touch her, but to brace the table beside her hip, caging her without trapping her. Protective, not possessive. Intent, not pressure. If destiny is showing you another wolf, he said, then destiny is testing me. Her breath stopped. And testing you, he added, voice low. To see what you choose. The words hit the exact center of her chest. Crown versus calling, duty versus destiny. Finn held her gaze, steady and unflinching, as if he felt the shift in the air, too. I won't lose you to a vision, he said softly. Not commanding, not pleading. Just truth. And I won't let the crown take you if it isn't what you want. Her breath trembled. Finn. He leaned in, not enough to touch, but enough that she felt every ounce of the heat he refused to act on. You are bound to me by blood, he said. But blood is not choice, that comes later. Her heart pounded. And when it comes, he murmured, I intend to be the one you walk toward. Before she could speak, before she could breathe, another tremor hit her. Not a vision. A call. Sharp, bright, unmistakable. Destiny was shifting again. The silver-eyed wolf flickered at the edge of her mind, closer this time, his breath a cold whisper along her spine. Raven's fingers dug into the edge of the table. Finn saw it instantly. His voice dropped, dangerous. Raven, what is it? I don't know, she said through clenched breath, but it's coming closer. His body tensed in an instant, a hunter waking, a king preparing for war. Then look at me, he said, anchoring her with his voice alone. Not at the vision, not at the dark, me. She did, slowly, fighting the pull, fighting herself. Their eyes locked. Heat and prophecy clashed between them. His next words were quiet, steady, terrifying in their simplicity. "When destiny comes for you," Finn said, "it will find me standing in the way." And destiny, as if hearing him, pressed harder. But Raven did not look away. Not yet. Not from him. Not from the man she was bound to. And the one destiny had begun whispering about. The storm had begun. And neither of them could pretend otherwise. The Crown Palace did not sleep. Even in the deepest hours of night, servants moved in quiet currents through the corridors, advisors whispered over ink and parchment, and guards patrolled the stone walkways with the unyielding discipline of wolves who served a king forged in war. Raven felt all of it as she stepped into the council wing the next morning, eyes following her, voices dipping into silence, curiosity wrapping around her like fog. Her presence had become a hinge on which every whispered rumor swung. The border girl, the king's blood-bound bride, the wolf who sees things no one else can. She ignored all of it. Her focus was the chamber ahead, the room where Finn held council. Inside, voices were already raised. Not loudly, no one dared shout in the king's presence, but tense, clipped, sharp with fear disguised as strategy. When Raven entered, the conversation snapped off as if severed. Finn stood at the head of the table, one hand braced on the polished wood, the other loose at his side. His posture was controlled, but the tension through his shoulders was unmistakable. 6 advisors flanked the table, all of them turning to appraise her with expressions ranging from wary respect to thinly veiled resentment. Finn's gaze found her instantly. It softened, only for a breath, only for her. "Raven," he said, voice low, "come." Her pulse steadied, just barely. She crossed the chamber and moved to stand at his right, aware of the eyes tracking every step. Finn shifted half a step, instinctively adjusting his stance so she fell inside his radius of protection. It did not go unnoticed. An advisor cleared his throat. Elder Garin, the same one who had presided over their blood vow. His expression was carved from stone. "Your Majesty, we were discussing the coronation timeline," he said. "Preparation requires weeks. Invitations, alliances, the Luna rites." "She is not prepared," another elder interrupted. A thin, sharp-faced man named Malthur. "With respect, Majesty, the girl is barely accustomed to palace corridors. How can she stand as Luna before the Pax?" Raven stiffened. "Girl." Finn didn't allow the disrespect to linger. He straightened, the air shifting as though the walls themselves sensed his rising authority. "Raven," he said calmly, "is standing right here. Speak to her as you would speak to your queen." A ripple spread around the table. Malthur swallowed. "Of course, Your Majesty. I meant no—" "You meant exactly what you said," Finn replied, voice soft enough to be lethal. "Choose your words with more care." His protectiveness hit her like heat and steel at once. Raven breathed once through the tightness under her ribs and spoke before tension could snap the room in two. "Elder Malthur has a point," she said, her voice steady. "I am new to court. I don't know your protocols, your alliances, your customs for a Luna queen." Her honesty surprised even Finn. Garin inclined his head slightly. At least he respected truth. Finn's jaw tightened. "You will learn, quickly." "Yes," Raven said softly, "but a rushed coronation risks more than uncertainty." Finn turned his head just enough to look at her. The intensity of his gaze could have pinned an army. "You would delay?" he asked. "It may be wiser," she said, "if circumstances demand caution." "Do they?" His tone was not skeptical. It was careful. Her heart thudded. "Finn, the visions are becoming stronger." Silence slammed into the room. Garin was the first to speak. "Visions?" Finn's voice cut across the chamber before anyone else could open their mouth. "What she sees is not for council ears unless she says so." A shockwave of discomfort rippled through the elders. Raven exhaled slowly. Finn, she murmured, they need to know something, enough to prepare. He looked at her for a long moment, tension riding through him like a contained storm. Then he nodded. Tell them. The room braced. Raven steadied herself on the edge of the table, not for weakness, but to anchor the truth she was about to share. There is movement in the dark, she said. Not rogues, not packs, something older, something that doesn't belong to this land anymore. Garen's face paled. A prophecy? Not a prophecy, she said. A pull. To what? Malther asked. Raven's voice dropped. To someone. Murmurs erupted. Finn silenced them with a glance sharp enough to wound. Describe it, Garen pressed. I can't, Raven admitted. The visions blur. I see a wolf I don't know. Eyes like silver fire, but nothing more. A rogue spirit? Someone whispered. A trick of grief? Another said. Finn's hand slammed down on the table. Quiet, but thunderous. She is not confused, he said coldly. She is not unstable, and she is not to be questioned as though she were. Raven placed a hand near his on the table, not touching, but close enough that he felt it. His breathing eased, fractionally. What matters, she continued, is that this presence is approaching, and it is tied to me. Whether through destiny or calling, I don't know, but the timing aligns too closely with the coronation to ignore. Garen rubbed the bridge of his nose. If something ancient stirs, the coronation may become a target. Or a trigger, Raven said quietly. Finn turned toward her fully. Does this wolf wish you harm? No, she said immediately. And she knew it was true. She didn't know how, but she knew. Finn absorbed that with a calm that was too still, too controlled. And do you wish him? He asked softly. His voice stayed calm, but something in it sharpened, possessive, restrained, unmistakably his. Raven's pulse stuttered. No, she whispered. I do not want him. Finn closed his eyes briefly, as if steadying something inside himself. When he opened them, the storm in them had quieted. That is enough, he said, but Garen lifted a hand. Majesty, he said carefully, a Luna bound to another presence, even by destiny, would weaken the crown's authority. Finn's voice turned icy. She is bound to me by blood. Blood is not destiny, Malther murmured. Finn's wolf bared its teeth and showed in the flash of his eyes. And destiny does not rule this kingdom, he said. I do. The room held its breath. One of the younger advisors ventured, if her visions are tied to her calling, perhaps they are meant to guide the crown. Raven nodded once, grateful for the sanity in the suggestion. Possibly, she said, but they are growing stronger, and the coronation will amplify every bond in the kingdom. If something is wrong, if something is coming, it will strike then. Finn stepped closer. Then we prepare for it, he said, and we proceed as planned. Her breath caught. You still want to move forward? Yes. His gaze locked onto hers. Because I will not let fear shape your future. Or mine. But destiny can be met blade first, he said quietly. I've done so before. Heat curled low in her stomach, unwelcome and unstoppable. He wasn't boasting. He wasn't posturing. He was telling her exactly who he was. The council continued debating strategy, but Raven barely heard them. Because Finn had stepped closer again, so close their hands almost brushed. So close she felt the heat radiating through the space between them. A restrained, tethered heat. One that waited for choice, not circumstance. When the council finally dismissed, Finn lingered by her side. He didn't touch her. He didn't need to. His presence wrapped around her like a vow. Walk with me, he said again. She followed. They stepped into an empty corridor, the air cooler, quieter. He didn't speak, neither did she. Their steps echoed in unison. As they passed a tall window, Finn stopped. "Raven." She turned. He held her gaze with a steady, unsettling honesty. "I will not share you with prophecy," he said softly, "and I will not lose you to something you don't want." Her breath trembled. "You think destiny can be refused?" "I know it can," he said, "if the will is strong enough." She swallowed. "And yours?" "Unbreakable." Her pulse fluttered. He took one slow step toward her. No contact, no claim, just proximity, heavy, deliberate, controlled. "When the coronation comes," he said, voice low, "you will stand beside me because you choose to, not because fate presses your hand." "Finn, the visions may test you," he continued. "They may test us both, but I am not giving you to a shadow in your mind." Raven breathed in sharply. The instinctive heat between them tightened, pulled taut as wire. "And if destiny insists," she whispered. A dangerous quiet settled over him. "Then destiny," he murmured, "will learn it cannot take what I protect." Before she could answer, another tremor hit her, a vision flickering at the edge of her mind. Silver eyes, closer, clearer. Her hand pressed to the wall for balance. Finn caught the shift instantly. "Raven?" She forced a breath. "It's nothing, just—" "It is not nothing," he growled softly. "Look at me." She did. His presence steadied her, sharpening the world, pulling her away from the pull of the unseen wolf. The vision receded. Slowly, grudgingly. When her breathing evened out, Finn spoke again. Not as a king, as a man, quiet, fierce, steady. "You are mine to guard," he said. "Whatever hunts you, vision or fate, goes through me first." Her heart pounded, helpless and uneven. "Finn." "No," he said softly. "Do not apologize, do not fear me, and do not hide from me." She swallowed. "I don't want to hide." "Good," he murmured. "Then don't." He stepped back, slowly, as though pulling himself from gravity. He left her there in the corridor, breath unsteady, vision stirring, destiny tightening its grip. And somewhere far beyond the palace walls, somewhere deep in the forests that bordered the kingdom's edge, a silver-eyed wolf lifted its head and began to move. Act 4, the destiny that tightened, and the king who refused to let go. The palace hummed with preparations. Servants carried armfuls of silks and ceremonial banners through the corridors. Advisors whispered over seating charts and alliance documents. Council members paced like wolves awaiting a storm. The coronation had been set for 3 nights from now. 3 nights. It felt like a countdown she could hear beneath her skin, pulsing in time with the visions that had begun to strike without warning. But it wasn't the ceremony she feared. It was what waited on the far side of it. Raven walked through the eastern garden alone, the winter sun low and cold behind the palace walls. Frost clung to the bare branches, crystalline and fragile. Her breath clouded the air as she exhaled, slow, steady, forcing her pulse to match the rhythm of her steps. Somewhere beyond the manicured hedges and the stone archways, the land stirred again, like a creature waking from hibernation. Her vision blurred. No, not here, not now. She pressed her palms against the cold railing overlooking the lower courtyard, but the darkness behind her eyes thickened, pulling her under. A forest. Moonlight breaking through branches, breath that wasn't hers. Silver eyes, closer than before, watching her, waiting. Her breath hitched. A growl, real, not vision, cut through the cold air behind her. "Raven!" Finn's voice. She snapped back into herself with a gasp. Her fingers shook on the railing. She curled them into fists so he wouldn't see. He strode toward her across the frost-bitten stones, his cloak stirring behind him like a shadow. His presence hit first, the heat, the authority, the storm-edged tension he'd carried since her visions intensified. He stopped a step from her, eyes scanning her face. "What did you see?" he asked. Not soft, not harsh, controlled. She opened her mouth to say nothing, but she caught the way his jaw flexed, the way his wolf pressed under his skin. So she didn't lie. "He was closer," she whispered. "The silver-eyed wolf." Finn's breath darkened the air between them. "I felt it," he said. She blinked. "You felt—" "Yes." He stepped closer, the proximity deliberate, grounding. "I felt your fear. It hit me like a blade." Heat flushed under her skin, not attraction alone, but the shock of being known so completely. "Finn, you shouldn't feel my visions." "Shouldn't," he said, voice low. "But I do." His eyes were a deep, dangerous gold, the color they took when his wolf pressed near the surface. "Why?" she whispered. "Because the bond is growing," he said, "with or without a coronation." Her stomach twisted. "And that vision—" His voice sharpened, possessive, controlled. "It pulled you so far you didn't hear me approach." Raven swallowed. "I heard something." "My wolf," he replied quietly, "because he was ready to tear the garden apart to reach you." Her breath stilled. He hadn't moved to touch her yet, but his nearness was a touch of its own, warmth, heat, restraint. He lowered his head slightly, his voice brushing her ear like a vow. "Look at me." She did, and the world steadied. Finn searched her eyes, as if confirming she was fully present. "You are not facing this alone," he said. "Not while I breathe." His tone held something new, something deeper than duty, sharper than protection. Possession, but the kind rooted in devotion, not control. Her pulse jumped. "Finn!" The wind shifted, sudden, cold. Raven stiffened. A vision hit hard. Silver eyes flaring in the back of her mind, breath brushing her cheek, a low rumble of something ancient reaching for her. Her knees buckled. Finn caught her before she fell, one arm locking around her waist, the other bracing her back. Her palms flattened against his chest. Heat shot up her arms. "Finn!" she gasped. "I've got you," he murmured. No panic, no fear. Just a steady, anchored certainty that wrapped around her like another heartbeat. She clutched his cloak as the vision pulsed again. Silver eyes, branches cracking under heavy paws, a pull like a tether wrapped around her ribs. She pressed her forehead to his chest as the world blurred. The jealousy in him sharpened instantly, silent, contained, unmistakable. "Is he touching you?" His voice was low, lethal. "No," she whispered, "not physically, just pulling." His arms tightened, not trapping, anchoring. "He will not take you," Finn growled softly. "Not in body, not in mind." She shuddered. The vision began to recede, slowly, reluctantly, until her breath synced with his. When it finally released her, Finn didn't let go. He kept one hand at her waist, the other at the back of her ribs, steadying, grounding her, offering strength without asking permission. Her fingers remained curled in his cloak. She realized she was pulling him closer. Finn exhaled through his nose, slow and controlled, as if wrestling with the urge to pull her against him entirely. "Raven." His voice was a rough whisper. She drew back just enough to look up at him. The heat between them tightened, unmistakable, pulling like a tide. His gaze dropped to her mouth, only for a second, then back to her eyes, restraint locking his body in place. "If you were mine already," he said quietly, "visions wouldn't dare touch you." Her breath caught. "Finn, but you haven't chosen yet," he continued, voice dark with emotion he refused to hide. "And I won't take what isn't freely given." A tremor ran through her, not from fear. "Finn," she whispered, "I haven't chosen because I don't know what I'm choosing between." "The crown," he said softly, "and the calling that keeps pulling at you. And you." His jaw tightened. "And me." The confession hung between them, heavy, fragile, utterly real. He lowered his forehead to hers. Not a kiss, not even contact, just one breath apart, held there by sheer will. "If you walk toward me," he murmured, "I will match you step for step." "Finn." "But if you walk away," he added quietly, "I will still protect you." Her throat burned. The restraint in him was a living thing, coiled, aching, but loyal. He drew back just enough to meet her eyes. "The coronation is in 3 days," he said. "If you stand beside me, the bond seals fully. Blood and crown. No force, destiny or otherwise, will reach you then. And if I don't?" His expression darkened, not anger, but something deeper. "It will break something in me," he said, "but I will not chain your choice." A cold wind swept through the garden. The pull of destiny tightened again, faint but unmistakable. Raven's voice trembled. "Finn, he's coming." "I know," he said. "No fear, just certainty. And I'll be standing between you and whatever answers that call." The bells tolled in the distance, announcing the coronation preparations, calling the kingdom to witness the rise of their queen. Raven stared at the distant towers, her breath shallow. She had 3 days, 3 days to choose: crown, calling, Finn, or something she didn't yet understand. When she looked back at him, the unspoken words in his eyes nearly broke her resolve. He wasn't asking her to choose him. He was hoping she would, quietly, dangerously, completely, and she had never been more afraid of wanting something so much. Snow fell steady over the palace, soft at first, drifting over towers and stone like sifted ash. Somewhere beyond the walls, wolves howled in answer to one another, voices threading through the winter air. Inside, the great hall burned with light and anticipation. But Raven was not there yet. She stood in the antechamber just off the main hall, palms braced on a stone table worn smooth by centuries of hands. Behind the closed doors, she could hear the kingdom gathering, low voices, shifting bodies, the rustle of banners as air moved through the vast space. She wasn't trembling. She wasn't unsure. For the first time since stepping into this palace, she felt completely clear. No more hiding. No more pretending the visions were weaker than they were. No more asking questions she already knew the answer to. She knew what she wanted. The only uncertainty left was what the night would demand in return. "You're early," she said, without turning. She felt him before she heard him. Heat, weight, presence. Finn stepped through the inner door that led from his private hall to the antechamber, closing it behind him with a soft click that seemed to narrow the world down to just the two of them. He wore ceremonial leathers dark as midnight, edged in silver, the crest of the crown pack over his heart. A king prepared for his Luna's coronation. A warrior first. He didn't speak at once. His gaze traveled over her, slow, thorough, as if confirming she was truly standing here and not caught somewhere between vision and waking. "You're steady," he said finally. "Of course I am." His mouth tilted, not quite a smile, more an acknowledgement. "You've stopped hiding from me." "There's no point," she said. "You see through me anyway." Something in his eyes softened, not a weakening, but a deepening, as if her honesty had cut through the last remaining layer he'd held between them. "Then tell me," he said quietly, "how bad is it?" She met his gaze head on. "The wolf in my visions is here," she said. "Tonight, at the walls, moving toward the palace." He stilled, not in fear, in readiness. "And you're certain," he said. "Yes." "And you're not running from it?" "No." Some tightness in his jaw eased, even as the line of his shoulders went more rigid. "Do you fear him?" he asked. She didn't hesitate. "No, I fear the choice he'll try to force." His eyes darkened, not with insecurity, but with something far more dangerous. Possession, controlled and sharpened. "You do not choose between me and destiny," he said. Not tonight. Not ever. And if destiny disagrees? She asked. Then it comes through me, he said simply. The words shouldn't have calmed her. They did. Finn, she said, no more soft answers. You told me to stop hiding. That goes both ways. His brow lowered. I haven't hidden from you. You've held back, she countered, for my sake, for the crown's, for control, but not tonight. Not if this is the line we stand on. His gaze searched hers, something raw and fierce moving beneath the restraint. Then answer plainly, he said. What do you want, Raven? Not what the land wants, not what visions press on you. You. It was the easiest thing she had ever said. You, she replied. I want you, and I want this kingdom safe. Everything else can be argued with. Something almost like pain flickered across his face, too full, too sharp to be contained by words. He took a step toward her. His hand rose, hovering near her cheek, close enough that she felt the heat radiating from his palm. Don't take that back, he said roughly. I won't. His breath hitched. Then the world lurched. The vision didn't slide in this time. It slammed. Cold detonated behind her eyes. Her lungs seized. For a heartbeat, the room dissolved into a wash of silver light and shadowed trees, a pair of burning eyes emerging from the dark. Raven's grip on the table slipped. Finn caught her before her knees could buckle, one arm locking around her waist, the other bracing her back. Raven! His voice went low and lethal. Stay with me. She dug her fingers into his shoulder, anchoring. He's closer, she ground out. Through the outer forest, at the walls. As if her words had pierced the stone, the floor under their feet gave a slow, ominous shudder. Not imagination, not vision. The palace itself felt it. Finn's wolf surged under his skin so fiercely she felt the vibration where he held her. You feel that? He said. Yes. Shouts rose on the other side of the connecting door, guards calling warnings. The pitch of their voices edged with something too controlled to be called panic, too sharp to be calm. Finn's expression hardened. Whatever's coming, he said, we face it together. She nodded once, then opened the door. He released her just enough to move, but his hand stayed at the small of her back as he crossed to the heavy inner doors that separated the antechamber from the main hall. When he threw them open, sound crashed over them. The great hall stretched out in front of them, filled from stone floor to gallery rail with wolves, alphas, ranked wolves, allies, the full heart of the kingdom. Torches blazed in iron sconces, banners hung heavy from the rafters. Every head turned when Finn stepped across the threshold. Every gaze sharpened when Raven stepped at his side. A third shudder rolled through the stone beneath their feet. The torches wavered. Then, far at the opposite end of the hall, the massive outer doors shuddered under an impact that shook the beams over Raven. Several wolves flinched back. Guards surged toward the doors, spears lowering, shoulders bracing. Hold ranks, a captain shouted. Brace! Another blow hit, harder. Snow burst through the cracks around the hinges, spraying across the stone like thrown salt. Raven's heart hammered, but not from fear of what was coming. Recognition. This was the moment the visions had been dragging her toward. Finn stepped down from the inner threshold, pulling her with him. He positioned them both in the center aisle, halfway between the throne platform and the trembling doors. A living line drawn in the stone. Your Majesty, Elder Garen's voice cut across the rising panic, thin and strained. We must get you back. Stand down, Finn snapped, never taking his eyes from the shaking doors. Anyone who runs will not be welcome in this hall again. The command hit like a physical force. Wolves froze. Raven felt the pull of the visions tightening inside her, a tether drawing not away, but toward this point, this place where crown and calling and choice collided. Raven, Finn said, voice pitched for her ears alone. Tell me what you see. She forced her vision open just enough to let the images in without drowning in them. Forest, she whispered, snow, and him, breaking through the last line of trees. He's almost here. He's not hiding anymore. As if in answer, a final blow crashed into the outer doors. They exploded inward. Wind howled through the hall, cold and furious. Torches blew out one by one in a chain of extinguished flame. Snow blasted across the floor in a whirling gale that ripped banners free and sent them snapping like torn wings of Raven. The temperature dropped so fast that frost bloomed in jagged patterns across the stone. And through the whiteout stepped him. The wolf was massive, twice the height of any natural beast, formed of storm and shadow, its fur a shifting interplay of smoke and moonlight. Every step left a dusting of ice crystals beneath its paws. The air around it crackled with cold that had nothing to do with the winter outside. Its eyes were exactly as she'd seen them in 100 sleepless nights, silver, burning, and fixed on her with unsettling focus. The hall went dead silent. Wolves who had never bowed to any power but their king's stared, stunned, instinctively stepping back from the impossible creature stalking into their sacred hall. Finn stepped in front of her. Not a thought, not a choice, just instinct. He planted his boots, shoulders widening, his body a wall between her and the approaching storm. "If you come for her," he said, voice carrying through the chaos like a blade, "you go through me." Jealousy slid beneath the words. Controlled, possessive, the kind that said what stood in front of her was his to protect, not his to own. The spirit wolf slowed. Its eyes flicked from her to him. The wind dropped, just a fraction. Snow still spiraled, but more lazily now, as if the storm was holding its breath. Raven stepped forward, not to leave his protection, but to stand at his shoulder. Finn's arm shifted, his palm brushing her back in warning. "This isn't a rival," she said under her breath. "It's something else." His jaw clenched, but he didn't drag her behind him. He adjusted, stance widening so they formed a line together. The spirit took another step. Its presence pressed against her skin like cold fingers. Not cruel, not welcoming, testing. "What does it want?" Finn murmured, eyes never leaving the creature. She listened, not with her ears, but with the part of her that had always heard the border differently than anyone else. The part that felt storms before the clouds gathered, that sensed danger in the way the wind bent through the trees. Now that same sense rose up with startling clarity. "It wants to know," she said slowly, "if I'm strong enough to stand where I'm about to stand." "And if you are?" Finn asked, her mouth curved, humorless. "Then it'll leave us alone." "And if it decides you aren't?" His voice dropped lower, darker. Her hand found his, fingers threading through his without thinking. "Then you'll fight something older than your crown to argue with it." "Correct," he said. The wolf stopped directly in front of them now, close enough that the cold radiating off its form seeped into her bones. Its head lowered, snout nearly level with Finn's chest. Finn didn't flinch. For a long moment, the hall held the three of them in a frozen tableau, king, chosen guardian, and the storm that had come to judge them. Then the spirit wolf inhaled slowly, deeply. The sound was like a winter gale drawn through a narrow pass. "Chosen," it said, not with spoken words, but with a resonance that shivered through her marrow. "Guard. Together." Raven's chest stung. Finn's fingers tightened around hers. "You hear it," he said. "Yes." "What did it say?" "That I was never meant to stand alone," she replied. "That whatever I am to this land, I'm meant to guard it, and I'm meant to do it with you." Something like relief and fury tangled in his expression, too complex to name. "So it doesn't want to take you," he said. "No." Her throat went tight. "It wants to see if I'll choose you anyway." His jealousy flared, brief, sharp, controlled. His wolf rose with it, not in fear of losing her, but in refusal to surrender what had been hard won. "And do you?" he asked, voice low, steady, edged. Raven turned from the spirit and looked up at him. Yes. The answer cost her nothing, because she had known it long before this night. His exhale shook with the force of everything he had kept contained for weeks. The spirit wolf watched them. Then, slowly, it lowered itself. Not to her. To both of them. A bow. Acknowledgement. An ancient thing's submission to a choice made by two living wolves. The frost in the air shimmered, wind shifted, and the storm broke. The creature's body came apart like rime under sudden heat, dissolving into a swirl of silver mist that rushed up and out through the broken doors, leaving only a glittering dusting of snow and a hall full of stunned, silent wolves. Raven stood in the center of it, hand in Finn's, heart pounding, but not with fear, with certainty. Finn turned to face her fully now. The eyes that met hers were dark, intense, and stripped of every layer of distance he'd once kept between them. "You do not want the crown," he said quietly. "No," she agreed. "I want the kingdom safe. I want to stand where the land speaks first. I want to walk its edges and feel when storms are coming." "And me?" he asked. Her voice softened. "You were never in question." The line of his jaw hardened, then broke into something almost like a smile. Dangerous, raw, reverent. "Then hear me," he said. He stepped closer, lifting their joined hands between them. "You are my queen," he said, "not because the crown says so, because I do, because this land does, because you chose to stand here when you could have walked away." Emotion burned up her throat. "And you," she said, "are my king, not because they bow to you, because you stood between me and everything that wanted to pull me apart." Heat flared between them, tempered by restraint. Finn lifted his free hand, fingers brushing her jaw, then cupping her face with a care that made her breath trip. "Say it again," he murmured. "You're my king," she whispered. He leaned in until his forehead rested against hers, that single point of contact so charged it might as well have been a kiss. "And you," he said, voice low enough only she could hear, "are mine." They didn't stand there long. The kingdom was still watching. The doors still hung broken on their hinges. Snow still dusted the stone like scattered ash, and the taste of something old and wild clung to the air. Finn's hand slid from her jaw to her shoulder, then to the small of her back. "Walk with me," he said. This time, the words were not a question. And she did not hesitate. They moved together toward the raised platform at the head of the hall. Wolves parted as they passed, not just in deference to their king, but in something else. Respect, recognition. The knowledge that both of them had just been tested by something older than law and had refused to break. Elder Garen stood waiting at the base of the steps, ceremonial knife in hand, eyes wider than she'd ever seen them. "The coronation," he began, voice hoarse. "Continues," Finn said, with new understanding. He led Raven up the steps, not ahead of her, but beside her, keeping their hands linked so no one could mistake her place. Garen swallowed, then lifted his gaze to them both. "Witnessed by pack and moon," he intoned, steadier now. "By storm and land, by bond freely chosen. Do you, Alpha King Finn, take this wolf to stand as your queen, your equal at the throne and at the border, to guard this kingdom with you?" "I do," Finn said. His voice did not waver. Garen's eyes shifted to her. "Raven of Frosthaven, do you accept this bond, not as a chain, but as a path you choose, to walk the edges of this land and its heart, as queen and guardian both?" Raven thought of snow-covered trees, of border winds and palace stone, of visions that had once dragged her forward like a tide, and of the man whose presence steadied every pull. "I do," she said. Blood sealed it, as it had the first night, only this time she knew exactly what she was binding herself to. When their palms pressed together, the weight that settled over her shoulders didn't feel like a crown dropping into place. It felt like a cloak, warm, solid, shared. When they turned to face the hall as king and queen, the roar that rose to greet them was not for ceremony alone. It was for what every wolf there had just witnessed. That destiny had come into their hall like a storm, and their rulers had stood against it. Together. Finn's fingers tightened around hers. He leaned in slightly, breath brushing her ear. "My queen," he murmured, "by choice, by bond, by everything I am." Her heart steadied. "And my king," she whispered back. "Always." He smiled then, slow, dangerous, deeply satisfied. The kind of smile that promised this was not the end of the story, only the beginning.